Hey everyone, I'm superphiz. I come from the Eth2 community, and I'm here with my good friend Ben Edgington.
Hey everybody, it's great to see you again, Fizz, and good to be
Hey,
trying this new thing.
yeah. So Ben does a bi-weekly newsletter called "What's New in Eth2," and I'm sure we'll talk about the name at some point. But the newsletter is all of the kind of updates and errata that you would not necessarily get from the ETH2 ecosystem unless you knew where to look. And as much as I enjoy Ben's newsletter, I wanted to sort of see if we can improve the reach and give people more of an audio format as we near the merge. And I reached out to Ben, and Ben said,
Oh
what
yeah,
did you say? Yeah. So this is really exciting for both of us. We don't know how it's going to work out. It's not scripted. It's not even formatted. We're going to hang out essentially for an hour and talk about the January 28th, 2022 edition of What's New in Eth2. And I'm going to learn a lot about what's on Ben's mind. And I hope that in your time with us, you learn a little bit too.
cool. Thanks, Fizz, for the introduction. So this is edition 83, 86, edition 86 of What's New in ETH2. I've been doing this for quite a while, and I don't know, maybe sometimes feels maybe it could get into a bit of a rut, or focus too much and not look broadly enough, or whatever. So it's good to try something new, and yeah, let's talk it over. Where do you want to start?
Your focus always seems appropriate. I love that. Like, I know it can shrink and grow, but you always seem to keep that the core focus on our progress toward a better Ethereum. So I do love that about your newsletter. The plan that we discussed is I'm kind of just going to scroll through Ben's newsletter and mention topics as I see them. And he's essentially going to just chat about what his thought was when writing that. In some cases, it will add more context, and in other cases, it's just going to be more or less the same thing that the newsletter already says. First, Vitalik was on Up Only. So I guess, did you watch it?
Yeah, I listened to the whole thing out on one of my daily walks, and it was entertaining. Vitalik is a great interviewee, and the Up Only guys. I've only come across them quite recently, last few months, but yeah, they're fun to listen to. It was a broad, wide-ranging interview, and yeah, it's worth a listen if you want a bit of entertainment.
Yeah, I haven't caught it. I do know my friend Lamboshi or Nolan is a huge fan of Kobe, but I listened to the Tetranote episode. I haven't heard this one. I will, based on your recommendation, I'll pull that up. And so moving on, the Beacon chain. Let's see. We've got 288K active validators. Can you tell me, Piermont Prater testnet kind of land? What you're seeing there?
So on the Prada testnet, it's quite similar to the mainnet, but participation is lower just because people aren't so committed to their validators, right? It's a testnet. There's no real value at stake, so people come and go. They tend to abandon their nodes once they're finished doing whatever they want to do, rather than exiting nicely. So participation is about, I think, 85%. Did I write? Yep. Which is fine. It finalizes, it works, it proposes blocks, but it's just not quite as smooth as it might be. So I've had some, one interesting thing is in the kind of Teku support forums, and I should say, for context, if anyone doesn't know, I'm product owner of Teku client. That's just broader context, so I'm most familiar with that. We get people, I set up my node on Prada, and its attestation efficiency is only like 80%, and I look at it and think, actually, you're doing really well.
Yeah, you're still floating.
And yeah, on mainnet, it's 99% plus, but on Prada, the effectiveness score from Beacon chain tends to drop dramatically and scares people a bit. Piermont,
So,
yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say the chain needs 66% of validators to finalize, and obviously mainnet runs at about 99.2%. And so it's not uncommon to see a test net running somewhere between 66 and 99%.
Yeah, and I think just coming back to mainnet, I think that 99% plus, sometimes up to 99.6 or 0.8% participation, well exceeds our expectations when we started this thing. And it has been running beautifully. People are really taking care of their nodes, they care about their stakes, and yeah, it's terrific.
It's something I'd like to talk about at some point, like the question of being who is running these nodes. Because we obviously, at some point, I've been under the impression that it was a lot of individuals running the nodes, and now we're learning more and more that exchanges and other operators are running large conglomerates. That's just something that maybe some point I'd like to dig into with you.
Yeah, I don't have a huge insight into that. There are various sources of stats around. Beacon Chain has a sort of staking pool monitor, but it can only identify about a third of the operators out there. So some of the larger ones, large staking operations are often quite stealthy. They prefer not to be identifiable for whatever OPSEC reasons. And it's quite hard to distinguish them from individual stakers. So nobody really knows. I mean, this is one of the intriguing things.
Yeah, and so to add on to that, we have kind of a new personality, OX Invis, or Invisible Symbol, who has been working diligently to connect these large operations with the validators that they run. And I'm not clear on his method, but anytime that I've tracked back, the quality checks out. So so he has shared some data with Michael Sproul, and they're connecting that so that we can share more of that with the community, get a better picture of how that diversity is working out.
Yeah, I think transparency is key. This is good, and the data's out there. I'm loving the Twitter, the daily Twitter update on incidents at the major staking pools and so forth. Haven't been so much lately, but there've been a couple of good updates on outages and oddities at some of the staking operations. I don't know who's running that. Maybe you do, but it's really good.
I've had some offline contact with him. I don't recall his name. As a matter of fact, I tried to tag that account this morning because Rocket Pool had its first slashing, and I tagged Eth2 Rect, and I wanted to tag that account as well. But at the moment I couldn't recall the name of it. But yeah, that's a very valuable resource. I really love it. So thanks to whoever's doing that. Sorry, and for anyone who's listening, Ben and I haven't done this and we haven't planned it, so we don't really know how much we're going to be on topic versus off topic, but I think we're both committed to just sort of enjoying the process. So I hope you enjoy it as well. We'll see what happens. What was this? Insecura. I didn't get too deep into that.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting project by Jacek from the Status team, the Nimbus team. And so Piermont testnet is basically deprecated. We're not maintaining it anymore. Teku's already exited. Lighthouse has exited. So it's become, we're not encouraging anybody to set up new validators on it. So it's sort of now a playground if people want to try wacky experiments. So what Jacek's done is create a long-range attack on the network. So he's got some validators which have created a fork. They've kind of gone back in time, voted for a different reality, and have created a fork of the Piermont network, basically as a proof of concept. And then he's looking at ways in which new joiners to the network can be duped into joining the wrong chain, so that they will see the wrong chain history, the one that he controls, not the one which is the majority or consensus, the reality as it were. And this is a well-known attack, the long-range attack. Theoretically speaking, it's sort of a little bit similar to a 51% attack, but has subtle differences. on proof of work. That 51% attack creates an alternative reality. But the rules of the game in proof of work are that when your 51% attack succeeds, everyone switches to that chain. You don't have two alternate realities. You just have the one, and everyone has to switch over because of the heaviest chain rule. Whereas in proof of stake, you can have these two parallel realities controlled by different validator sets. And we have this whole thing about weak subjectivity. That's the key word if you want to sort of look up how we deal with it or plan to deal with it in Eth2. Weak subjectivity is a thing, and we can do a lecture on that sometime, but that's the thing. So really interesting exploration by Jacek. I mean, to see this kind of theoretical idea actually carried out in practice is brilliant. His conclusion is it's not that easy to pull off, and it's, I think, fairly easy to defend against, and you can defend against being duped by such an attack. But nonetheless, it's not just theory; it's a real thing.
It sounds like the value here is if we can learn how to dupe people into joining the fake chain, we also gain the knowledge of how to bring our onboard new validators onto the correct chain. So we learn both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder to us that we need the infrastructure in place to support the weak subjectivity that we plan to is a defense against this attack. So we need a way for new joiners to the network to gain be very confident that they have the right chain. So they can, perhaps we can have a decentralized way to gather checkpoints from upstanding members of the community, like Beacon Chain or Ethereum Foundation or whatever. You can go around, you can gather whatever number of checkpoints you feel would satisfy you, and then you make sure you only join the chain that has that checkpoint in it.
Makes good sense. The next thing is something that's really exciting to me, and I'm going to issue your caveat on your behalf. Ben is product owner at Eth2, and because of that, he's very careful to talk about client diversity in what you would call a safe way, because it could very easily come across that Ben is saying, hey, everyone, leave the supermajority client and join Eth2. And so I want to recognize that position for him, that when he's talking about client diversity, I know that he's not only promoting his product, he is promoting the health of the network. And he has very valuable thoughts about the overall network health. He's not just trying to convince you to switch to Eth2, which you should. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I love this section. What are your overall thoughts on client diversity right now?
Yeah, thank you for the caveat. And I would be extremely uncomfortable if Eth2 had more than, say, 25 or 30% of the network. The sweet spot is like 25% at the moment, or 20 to 25, depending on whether Lodestar is considered kind of production ready. So I was scared. I mean, so we got this number from Michael Sproul's analysis, which is probably the most accurate number we can get on actual validator distribution. So that's where is the stake in the system, and I think it's 68 point something% of the stake is on Prism run infrastructure, according to his analysis, and the error bars seem quite small, at least for Prism on that. And 68% is above the magic number of 66%. It means that if there's a consensus bug in Prism, that immediately gets finalized. I mean, within 13 minutes, that's finalized. We got no opportunity at all to remedy that. So we have a bug baked into Ethereum forever at that point. And depending on the bug, it might be something trivial, or it might be something severe, like, the Bitcoin inflation bug. Imagine, creating a couple of trillion ether and not being able to roll it back. I mean, it would be messy. And the question is, what do we do in this circumstance? Do all the other clients are doing the right thing, but they're on a different chain? Do we replicate the bug in those, get them to join the Prism chain, and then kind of have some sort of hard fork to undo whatever happened? Might be feasible, might not be. Very unfair to the minority clients. the people who were doing the right thing, or do we say no? Rules are rules. We stick to the spec. The ones that behaved in accordance with the spec are correct, and they may be the minority, maybe 32%, but of the validators, not necessarily of the rest of the infrastructure. I mean, if Infura is running Teku, which it is, Teku will be following the correct chain. So all the dApps and so on and services that rely on Infura will be on a different chain from the incorrect chain. So it's a mess, right? It's a big mess. And the problem is, if we want to get the Prism validators that have forked off back onto the correct chain, you can't do it because they've finalized the wrong chain. So by definition, getting them back on the right chain is a slashable offense. All they can do is exit at that point and stop validating.
In reality, they're not going to accept a social consensus that means that they upgrade to a client that then slashes them. I mean, they're going to say, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay on our chain. And at that point, they are the super majority. They control a significant portion of, they control enough of the chain that they can set the rules at that point.
Yep. Yeah, depending on whether exchanges and whether infrastructure follows or not. And honestly, I was around in DAO fork days. You were around in DAO fork days, and this is going to make that look like an afternoon at the beach. I mean,
there's no happy ending. Yeah,
exactly. It's just horrible. Every consequence is unpleasant. So I just want to avoid that situation, which means there's an imperative on everybody to get the proportion of validators on the majority client, ideally below 33%. That's the nirvana, but certainly below 66%. And it's also self-interest as well. If you are running the majority client, you run more risk of loss and risk of severe consequences in such an event. So on the good side, there are encouraging signs around. I mean, I think people are finally starting to take this a little bit more seriously. So the astonishing thing is that for the first year, we started the beacon chain with Prism with about 70%, and we know that because there was a weekend when they stopped producing blocks. Every Prism client stopped producing blocks. We missed 70% of the blocks. So that was near the beginning, and now a year later, we're still at 70%-ish, nearly. Nothing's changed. The network's grown by 10 times, and yet nothing's changed.
Kind of felt like well, people are recognizing this, and the trend is going to change. People are going to recognize the need to update their clients, and kind of this year on, we've realized no one has done that. Like nothing has changed. Yes. And so I love hearing you talk about we are hearing sprinkles of optimistic news, but I don't trust any of it. Like until Michael Sproul says we are below this threshold, I don't trust what anyone tweets or writes in DMs about. And I'll be specific. We're talking about 3 exchanges, Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance, who essentially run full Prism shops with 30, 40, 50,000 validators. We're hearing rumors that they're talking about changing, but until we actually see that on the chain, I don't believe it at all. I want to see it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I think solo stakers are in an awkward position. I really think that this is mostly incumbent on the large operations to get with the program. They've got the resources to make a change, and 2 or 3, as you say, large operators making a change will make a material difference. Will potentially rescue the situation. Solo stakers, you may wish to de-risk your position by swapping to another client, but I don't want to make anyone feel guilty or feel that they must. I think new stakers should definitely choose a non-majority client. But if you're an existing Prism staker, don't panic. If you feel confident, change. But otherwise, this is not necessarily your issue to solve.
Yeah. That's if you are running one validator and you expended all of your resources and you did your best to get that one validator running and it's running Prism, please stay where you are, you're okay. We're not talking to people running one validator right now. We're talking to, for example, the one exchange who runs 50,000 validators on Prism and could today change 1/4 of their validators and correct this entire problem if they chose to. So yeah, we definitely, I have been guilty of this in the past. I've been guilty of promoting this message to home validators that you have to change. It took me a while to recognize that your efforts are better spent helping all of us change the exchanges rather than focusing on your one validator and trying to make a huge difference. It's good and it's symbolic, but it won't really change the tide. So fair message.
Yeah, agreed.
We also have slash.info, I think. And slash.info is a product that goes over this kind of slashing stuff and then gives guides to switch if you want to. Clientdiversity.org is another one.
Yeah, I didn't include slash.info. I nearly did, but I just the way the numbers are presented just didn't sit quite right with me. So I'd like to see a bit more work done on how the numbers and risks are sort of presented. I felt that it didn't reflect that a normal level is maybe 25% each per client, and the risk bars seemed a bit wrong, so I didn't include that one consciously this time.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll share that that feedback. The developer of that is someone who's contributing to client diversity with the intention of participating in the eStaker grants round that will hopefully begin in February. It's been delayed a little bit, but that is fair feedback. Just gotta dig a little more, but we'll pass on that for now. Latest merge spec. That's a big one. Well, this is a minor one actually, but it's a minor. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's an update, right? So it is a breaking change technically. The main thing is around this engine API. So this is the way that the consensus client talks to the execution client, or in old lingo, Eth2 client speaks to the Eth1 client. There were some, as we thrash this out on the test nets, and the way we have this optimistic sync thing going on, whereby because it's quite heavyweight validating ETH1 blocks, we try to do it as little as we can. So the beacon client sort of optimistically syncs up with what it believes is the right chain, but that's unvalidated. It doesn't know that the blocks in that chain that it's optimistically synced up are valid. So it then needs to go back and validate the blocks in the chain once it believes it's found the correct head of the chain. And some of the semantics around the expectations on the ETH1 client, the execution client in the old interface, just meant it was doing more work than it needed to do. So we've changed it up a bit and just changed some of the spec, and it should just make things smoother. So breaking change, we need to update the clients. That means Kintsugi will be stopped. That's the current merge testnet in 2 or 3 weeks, I guess. And we will start a new testnet with the new spec, which is hopefully the final spec. We'll see. And there was some confusion about the naming. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, I was in part of
Tim's original article around it. I got this 20 minutes before I pushed press send on what's new in Eth2. I saw his article and thought, oh, it's got the new testnet info. So I included that hastily. He had put the name as Kiln. I transcribed it as Klim with an M. It turns out
I think I'm calling it Nilk. I don't know, or Link. I don't know. Any permutation works, right?
It turns out after some Twitter debate that the intention was Kiln, as in for firing bricks.
Which is great, because if you get the idea behind Kintsugi, then Kiln is also, it's a natural extension. So the confusion won't be long-lived.
Let's hope not. So yes, there's an insight into my process of putting this thing together, scrambling at the last moment. But yeah, Kiln it is. And we'll start that in a couple of weeks once the clients have incorporated the latest changes to the spec.
It's mid-February is the target for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't talk about dates in the future anymore.
Well, no. So, hey, this is it's a topic later, but one of my roles is to prepare people on the testnet, like when develop is not a fair question. It's not fair, but preparing to run testnets, that there is some validity to that preparation for people who, can expect to run a testnet at a given time. But
yeah, I would best guess a couple of weeks, mid-February. Yep, since we're end of Jan now. Yeah, we don't have a date deadline for doing that. Just to shill a consensus thing, we're doing a webinar. It's in What's New in Eth2. It's going to be my colleague Adrian on the TechU side, and I think Gary Schulte on the Besu side. So next Wednesday, we're doing On the Verge of the Merge webinar to how to run TechU and Besu as a merge client on the Kintsugi testnet, or if we have the Kiln testnet by then, I guess we'll do it on that.
Does Gary work for Besu now?
Yep.
Okay, I know him as Suburban Dad, but I didn't recognize him making the transition into a client team. So great, good for him. Yes, and thank you for sharing that webinar. When my mind spiraled off into Suburban Dad. When is that webinar?
Next Wednesday, 9th of February at 4 p.m. UTC, which is GMT. And there's a sign up page. I mean, you'll have to go to eth2.news to get the link.
Great, and I will also look forward to sharing that on whatever assets I have. Cool. So we talked about Kiln. I don't think that that we're going to have a hugely productive conversation if we try to talk about timing of the merge. There was a lively discussion on was it the implementers call? Or maybe all core devs. Anyway, so there's a general kind of consensus that the first potential target will be in early June.
I think it's worth covering the kind of the parameters. Face it, what are the constraints and what are the aims of the conversation. So, and you have 2 points of view, right? I mean, the typical product manager or project manager kind of has a deadline, for whatever reason that deadline is there, and kind of tries to fit things in to meet that deadline. And we kind of we have a deadline, which is this difficulty bomb, which was reset in the last hard fork on ETH1 and pushed back. The expectation is that somewhere around mid-July that will start becoming a nuisance. It will slow down the Ethereum chain. The block time will grow to 30 seconds and beyond, and it will just become even harder to transact.
Unusable. Yeah.
So ideally, in an ideal world, that's always been the forcing function for proof of stake, right? I mean, for all these years, all the times we've pushed it back.
It's funny because it's never enough time. Like no matter how much time is given, it's still like, we needed another month. It seems inevitable.
Yep. So in an ideal world, all things working perfectly, it would be great to hit a merge date of late June or early July. The bomb is gone forever, and we're on proof of stake, and we can forget about that, and we have a bright future ahead. That's all nice, and you can kind of order the steps until we get there, and on your Gantt chart it looks okay, but on the other side, you kind of got the client devs who've got to write this stuff, and they tend to have a slightly different view of the world, which is more kind of risk-based, and are much more aware of the uncertainties. We don't have a final spec. We have a candidate now, but we don't know that it's the one. We haven't even implemented that candidate yet, and we know there's a huge amount of testing and experience. There's things go wrong, and the happy flow is rare. So I think we had a little bit of pushback from devs on the call, just to say a slight reluctance to commit to that timeline. It's aspirational, but they want to be a bit more cautious about it. So we need a fallback. What happens if we don't hit that? We have some issue we need to fix. It takes 3-4 weeks. It sets us back. We can't get it out by early July. What kind of fallback can we have? And fundamentally, we'll need to do an Eth1 fork and push back the bomb again. So we talked a bit about different ways that could be organized and so on. So how's it look? I don't know. It's really hard to judge from here.
For me, the thing is, I'm used to this development cycle in Ethereum. Like I'm very okay with it. I get the way that things work. People confuse when I say that I'm excited about a June target, that I think it's happening in June. I don't think it's happening in June. I don't expect anyone to think it's happening in June. What excites me is that we have a target now, because for years and years, it has been, well, it's some point in the future. We don't know, maybe 22, 21, 2022, we don't know. So actually setting any target gives us the feeling of being closer than we've been in the past. It doesn't matter what that target is. And that's really where I'm at.
Yeah, that's fair. Kid looking forward to Christmas. I get it. I like to kind of draw a distinction between planning targets and deadlines. And people often hear deadlines. We are fully committed to this date. If we don't hit it, it's a failure. That's not what we do. Planning targets, however, are useful because they help you just to order events, order test nets and things, and just helps you to gauge whether you're slipping and find the reasons for that and so on. So, I mean, as an example, Altair, that the fork we did on the Beacon chain a while back, that was originally slated for late June, if I recall correctly, and ended up happening in October. And there was no single event that pushed it back. It was just death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, not death, but delay by a week here, 2 weeks there, just a little shift, just late decision making, and it just went out and out and out. And we didn't set a sort of planning target for that. We didn't put the sort of project management apparatus around it, and so we didn't really notice. I mean, suddenly one day it was like 3 months late, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I think there's a desire to avoid that as well.
It's difficult for casual observers who see any date. So if I put, if I tweet the first target for the merge is June 2022, many people immediately jump to, well, what day in 2022 or what day in June? And I'm like, whoa. It's not that kind of target. It just means that we're getting closer to the goal. It's the thing that I just want people to understand, that a target is great, but it's not a date. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in June. It means that everyone is coordinating efforts to try to line things up for that date or that month. And that's exciting in itself. Like, that's all it has to be, is just a goal. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, me too. And I think merge 2022 is pretty much nailed on. I mean, it's going to take some huge disaster for us not to deliver this.
Careful what you say, sir. This is Ethereum you're talking about. No, just kidding. It makes me think back to Vitalik's original Serenity. I think it was going to be 2015, maybe. It's been a while. So I guess Paratosh and Marius have this is the shadow fork. That's very interesting.
This is a really fascinating project that Parry and Marius kind of did on the side, as it were, just their own initiative, as I understand it. So they took the Gurley network, which is a proof of authority network. It's, if you join one of the Ethereum Eth2 testnets, you'll stake on Gurley, and there's quite a lot of activity on it one way or another. And they basically made a copy of the entire network, so a copy of the state, of it, but also the mempool. So all transactions from the Goerli network in future are relayed over to the shadow fork. So effectively, it's a duplicate of Goerli running alongside it, but running the proof of stake protocol. So and what that gives us is a real world sort of transaction flow to test the proof of stake network against. And the apparatus that they've used to do this could be applied to the mainnet, so that at some stage, I mean, it's heavier to do. It takes a day to sync up and so on. So it's not quite so easy to spin up. But in principle, we can shadow fork the mainnet and basically run the whole of current Ethereum on a proof of stake system, just running kind of in the background and see all the transactions and so forth. So this is brilliant, and it's not perfect because because the transactions are relayed across, the mempool will be a little bit different, just because nodes see the network slightly differently, and eventually the states will diverge and transactions will start becoming invalid. So sort of thing you want to restart every week or two just to sort of keep them in sync. But yeah, it's going to provide a really, really good test for the clients and the whole proof of stake system.
Yeah, I can't wait to do this on Shadow mainnet. I think that will just be a really fun opportunity. It will be, for all intents and purposes, really executing the merge on just a version of mainnet that's not mainnet. So that's wildly exciting. Do we? I guess it's hard to know. Do you think this will always be a developer thing, or do you think that we'll actually end up running community test nets using the shadow fork of ETH1 idea? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I don't know how that works. I mean, because you bridge across the existing ETH1 transactions, you don't want your testnet transaction to be valid on Ethereum, because otherwise, that could be a problem.
Yeah, that's right. If they're identical. Yeah.
So you want to, rather than kind of shadow fork it, you want to actually fork it and make the fork independent if you're going to do that. That might be in the roadmap. I don't know, to be honest. It would be good to test. Yeah, for sure. We definitely need to test something at that scale.
Yeah, I look forward to that. So Rocket Pool. How many times a day do I say Rocket Pool? I don't know, a lot. So close to 1% of all validators. Yeah, you took an issue with something they said here, the second largest Ethereum staking provider, which maybe they meant a smaller kind of subsection because they are saying they're second to Lido, but we know that there are many centralized exchanges, obviously Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, Bitcoin Swiss, who are significantly larger. But still, it's notable. They're making progress.
Yeah, I'm impressed so far with Rocket Pool, and yeah, getting to almost 1% of the network in how many weeks is it? 11 weeks is it's good going. So yeah, all power to them. I love it. I think decentralized staking is super valuable. I mean, I think this is really a game changer.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I thought that after launch I would migrate to something else, like have another passion project. But in fact, like my passion for Rocket Pool is just increased as I, get more involved. So that's cool. DVT, two implementations of DVT being SSV by blocks and OBOL.
Yeah, DVT, right? is not deep vein thrombosis. It's distributed validator technology. So this used to be called secret shared validators, which is such a weird name. It doesn't really tell you anything about it. Distributed validator technology is better, and so one of the fascinating things about the Ethereum 2 protocol is that it's had baked into it from the start this idea you can do multi-party compute. So you can, instead of running one node, you can run, say, 3 nodes or 4 nodes that act as one node and collaborate. each holding their own private key. And that's future iterations of the spec also include this property. So it's been designed with this in mind. And that really gives you resilience and robustness, and the ability to run different clients. So you could run 4 different clients as one node. If one starts misbehaving, the others just vote it out or vote it down. You have a threshold signature scheme. And it protects you against network forks. It protects you against client failures, downtime, helps you with maintenance. And you can do it all trustlessly. So we could run a network, where you're running a node and I'm running a node and a couple of others running a node, and we're all staking, but on this distributed system, but it's acting as one node, and we don't have to trust each other. It's a trustless setup. So it's beautiful mathematically, and it's actually coming to fruition. I mean, we have these implementations now that you mentioned.
I run into quite a few people who say, Fizz, why don't you push DVT more? And for me, the reality is most of the people who come to ETHStaker have already staked. Like if they have 32 ETH, they've already staked. They're looking for solutions for staking with less than 32 Ether, which is something that DVT doesn't really solve. But as far as like an anti-slashing kind of technology, I think it's really valuable. My focus really would be on getting more of these decentralized pools that allow people with less than 32 Ether to stake. I know DVT is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And it is a valuable resource.
Yeah, it's kind of a layer in the infrastructure below that. It's kind of shared staking infrastructure, but you still need to build the shared staking solution on top of that.
ETH Wizard, it's great to hear you mention that. Shout out to Remy Roy from Stakehouse.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of quiet work being done on tooling. The Stakehouse thing is great. I join when I can the regular calls they do, which is not often, but there's good stuff going on with that and Stereum and a bunch of other stuff that I mentioned at the bottom, just around making it easier to run these clients. And as a client implementer, this makes me really happy, right? Because people sort of want to have shiny front ends and things, and where's the Teku web interface? And if we built your web interface, it would hurt your eyes, I promise you.
I take it.
And I'm really happy to do the back end work to enable it if somebody tells us what they need to do it. But in terms of making a client agnostic web interface, that's work much better done by people in the community who have expertise and can make it unified and manageable for all the clients. So I'm really happy to see these solutions around that facilitate spinning up nodes and so forth, and swapping nodes. One of the things we've done recently is this was promoted initially by Daplion from the Lodestar team, who used to work for Dapnode, I think, and then picked up by James He from the Prism team, which is a common key management interface that all the clients are now supporting. We've just released ours for Teku. And it just means that front-end tools can now have a unified experience for moving keys between clients or managing the keys, and the tooling doesn't have to handle 5 different schemes for doing it. There's just one way, and that's a great example of how things can work.
Yeah, both Daplion and James He have been really supportive of this client diversity goal. Like you said something that really got me, Ben. It's the first time I've really thought about it this way. I have wanted you to develop a front end for Teku, but you sort of said something like your work is implementing. Like that is your focus, and that's an extremely valuable goal. We shouldn't also give you side responsibilities and say, hey, do this too, because that's not your target. And so we recognize, like the steakhouse community, the independent developer community, there's a lot of opportunity for them to come in and do something, pick up maybe some of the slack that isn't your focus, because what you're doing, what the implementation teams are doing, is the most valuable work in the community right now. So it's not our place to give you more. It's our place to appreciate what you've done.
Yeah, that's part of it, Fizz. And you know, there's core stuff which we're focused on, and we don't have unlimited resources, unfortunately. But there's also this sort of idea that we want to be kind of agnostic to the final solution, and you know, there's no reason why DApp node should have the same front end as Stereo, and they may wish to do it differently in order to you know, differentiate themselves. So and the other thing is, we don't want to kind of duplicate what Prism's done, because but if we don't duplicate what they've done, then that just has another problem. We have an unfamiliar interface and so on. So I think generally, in terms of separation of responsibilities, you know, drawing a line, we can put in the low level interface, and then others can build as many front ends on that as they like. I just works as a separation of concerns.
Really see in the future, and that I look for individual stakers to be less concerned about the client they're running, so much so that Teku, Prism, Lighthouse, and Nimbus are sort of abstracted away. Not a negative way, just that, you know, the job can be done by any of the four, and our target is diversity, not in choice. And really, I look forward to that being engineered so well that people can configure a device online, get it, and plug it in, and it stakes with whatever client is there. It doesn't have to be a random client, but just simplify the process so that we're not so focused on what client you're running. We're more focused on, are you staking successfully? So that's just my goal.
Yeah, and kudos for Rocket Pool for kind of making that kind of real in their environment.
Thought that, but I didn't want to say it, because obviously I say Rocket Pool 95 times a day, but they have done a great job. They have a randomizer in their installer now that will choose a random client, and if it happens to be the majority client, it will say, hey, are you sure you want to do the majority client? Do you want to try again? So I do appreciate their contributions. Let's see.
Do you want to get down to kind of research stuff, a couple of interesting things?
Yeah, that's where I'm going to follow your lead. I get a little, you know, I'm a community member. I see the research and I'm like, I don't understand all of that. So yeah, tell me what's interesting to you.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of skimming the surface a bit on this, I have to say. I mean, the latest proposals, and the first one is really out there. So this is Vitalik with 16-second finality, and some ideas, very conceptual at the moment. He freely admits this is years away, but we have the information available on chain. You know, the validator setup. We have enough information in the votes to very quickly reach finality, which means that we have a state that will never be reverted. So you could send money to an exchange or send, you know, Ether to an exchange, and within 16 seconds they would, you know for sure that would never be reverted, and that's final. So you don't have to wait for whatever 15 block confirmations or whatever it is these days. It's, you know, and it makes it practical for sort of payments in person and that kind of thing. Nobody's going to hang around for 16 minutes or whatever, 13 minutes or whatever it is now to get their coffee.
Which used to be the dream of Bitcoin. Like, send them a Bitcoin transaction and wait 10 minutes before you collect your coffee. Yeah. And that wasn't a dig. That's just the way history used to, like, how we used to imagine it.
So fast finality is definitely interesting and useful. Question is how to achieve it, and Vitalis, there are a number of ways to attack this, and it's all about the overhead of the traffic on the network, because you've got to analyze the votes from all of the participants. So somehow you've got to either make it easier to count the votes and, you know, verify the signatures, or you've got to reduce the number of votes somehow. He looks at both. reducing the number of votes is interesting. So at the moment, we have this thing that to revert finality would cost a third of the Ethereum stake. So you've got to have 2/3 of validators voting for one block, one checkpoint, and 2/3 voting for a different checkpoint. So at a minimum, 1/3 have voted for both, and they get slashed. So currently, that would be 3 million Ether, the cost of reverting finality. Now that's pretty high, right? I mean, we could probably have a lower threshold for that, depending on what we're securing. So he has a little in his article. He has a sort of internal EF poll on what ought to be the cost of reverting finality, which is quite interesting. And so potentially we could have fewer validators voting at any stage, which would reduce the overhead and allow us to achieve finality quicker. So there's stuff like that. So very interesting, long way away potentially, but maybe doable.
I just learned before we do research next week or next 2 weeks from now, I need to carefully read the research so I can be with you, because I get some of it, but fast finality seems it's a little out of reach for me right now.
I mean, so in some ways I'm writing for different audiences kind of when I do this. What's New in Eth2 started out 3.5 years ago as a very technical thing, basically for my team, the Teku team. I was writing for them just so that they, take away from them the burden of keeping up with the spec changes, which were just insane, and keeping up with whatever the latest things were. And it was quite in the nuts and bolts of what was going on. Over time, I've sort of grown an audience, but also raised the level, so it's not nearly so in the nuts and bolts anymore. And in the research stuff, I was kind of trying to highlight a few things, but not.
You've made it so much more consumable. I'm more able to consume the entire article now than I might have. Maybe it's because I've had more exposure to it than in the beginning, when I would listen to the calls and read the article and still not know what was going on.
Yeah, I would. Over time, I've added a lot more narrative. I mean, it's one of the things I talk to Evan Van Ness a lot, and Andrew Codup, and I don't want to replicate what they do in Week in Ethereum. They do their thing. I don't want to be an alternative to that. I don't want to kind of copy what they're doing. I'm trying to do something different here. I'm adding a lot more narrative. Over time, I've added more opinion, which is fun, and trying to unpack some of the meaning of stuff a bit more. So hopefully people appreciate that. I kind of enjoy writing it. So though when it gets to midnight on Friday and I still haven't finished, I do get a bit kind of tearful,
stressed out. Yeah. So I'm going to take another swing at this one. Can you tell me about secret non-single leader election?
Yeah. So
in 10 words or less.
Definitely not without notice. So this thing about validator anonymity. So one way of attacking the chain is we know ahead of time who is the proposer of a block in the next epoch. So we know who the next 32 block proposers are. And if you know their IP address, if you somehow can de-anonymize them, which is not impossible, then you could DDoS them and you could just stop the chain producing blocks. So that's unpleasant. So how can we avoid that? So one option is that the only the validator knows itself when it's its turn to propose a block. So I'm slated for block 3 billion for that slot, and only I know ahead of time that it's my slot, and the rest of the network doesn't find out until afterwards. And so the attacker doesn't have any notice. And various proposals involving snarks and zero knowledge proofs and other mechanisms, fairly complicated, have been put forward to do this. And I would talk about Whisk here, which is one. So Vitalik, at the moment, we have this model where there's exactly one proposer per slot. And if you don't show up to do your duty, then it's an empty slot. So Vitalik sort of done a thought experiment of what if we relax that constraint, if we allow multiple proposers per slot, and then we can it's much easier. We already have mechanisms to select a subset of the validators to which we use when we aggregate attestations and things. We just reuse that. So we select on average 5. Sometimes it might be 3, sometimes it might be 7. Occasionally it will be 0, but very rarely. And they propose a block in a slot. And then you've got questions about how do you handle having multiple blocks in the slot, which is a different problem, but maybe easier to solve. So that's so that's that one.
So in my mind, I have VDF as the solution for that. Is VDF, is that mothballed research, or is that still?
Yeah,
I
so
haven't heard anything
VDF,
about it.
yeah, solves a different issue, I think, which is around quality of the randomness available to us. So at the moment, we have quite good randomness in protocol, but it's not perfect. It's slightly biasable. So, but if you want really good randomness, then the gold standard is this verifiable delay function thing. Justin Drake has been working on it. I haven't heard much about it lately either. I mean,
I guess
yeah.
My interpretation or my understanding was that it allowed for essentially anonymous block proposers that could be revealed later. But again, I'm showing my weakness.
Yeah, I'm a bit hazy on it, to be honest, mate. So let's move on.
Yeah, good idea. Let's see, Alex Stokes. Withdrawals from the beacon chain.
Yep, progress. So there's work to do on both sides. We need a withdrawal mechanism on the beacon chain side so that we can signal that the validator balances to be converted into real ETH. And then we need, on the execution side, we need to create that ETH out of nothing. You know, we need to make sure that the validator balance on the beacon chain goes to 0 and the account on the execution side is credited with that balance. Or if we just allow, if we allow withdrawals of just rewards and keep the stake, then equivalently we need that. So how does the execution layer become aware of this? We need to change the EVM, make it aware of the beacon chain. So something happens on the beacon chain, and then the EVM can become aware of it. So we encode the state root of the beacon chain in the EVM, make an opcode for it. And this makes effectively Ethereum self-aware. I mean, I don't want to scare anyone here. It's not Skynet, but
AI, yeah.
But it can now prove things about itself, like the state of the beacon chain is accessible, not just the validator balances, but everything is accessible to the EVM, and you can make proofs about things that are happening on the beacon chain in the EVM, which is fascinating to think through the kind of possibilities. So initially it allows withdrawals to happen, but in future there could be other things going on here.
I think from the layman's perspective, people are looking forward to the merge. A lot of people are under the misperception that the merge means that deposited ether will be unlocked. But what people may not realize is that tooling hasn't been written yet. The withdrawal tooling hasn't been written. And so after the merge, the next area of development will be, like you said, this awareness between ETH1 and ETH2 so that withdrawals are possible. And of course, that is Shanghai, which is the final step in implementing proof of stake. And at that time, withdrawals will be available. Did I say any of that correctly?
Yeah, get ready for when withdrawal. I mean, when merge is getting a bit tired now.
I mean, 2028, come on. And I mean, let's not. I was going to say, let's be honest. It's not going to be XXX, but I won't play that game yet. We'll give it a few weeks. Let me see. Regular calls. Anybody who's looking can check at these. I'll zip through them really quick. So the implementer's call was 27th of January. We've pretty much talked about the same things that are relevant there.
Yeah.
Steakhouse had a call on January 19th. So those are historical. Upcoming is what's important. Wednesday, February 9th, on the verge of the merge. Oh, this is what you were referencing.
Yeah, this is what I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So, and the other one is the merge community call number 3, which Tim Baker and I think Trent Van Epps are hosting, which is basically for any users of Ethereum who are concerned about the merge to get an update on where they stand, what's going to be happening, ask any questions. You can go to the GitHub issue and ask questions ahead of time. And that, I think, will be on the Ethereum Foundation YouTube. I don't have any further coordinates for it than that, but there's a GitHub issue with the agenda and so on.
I look forward to sharing those more. Also, February 7th is an ETHstaker day where we're planning to release more of this client diversity data so that we can have a coordinated push to kind of focus our efforts in the right direction. Because for so long, we've sort of shot in the dark about who needs to improve client diversity, but we plan to maybe coordinate and target that effort a little more beginning February 7th. So I'm
fantastic. So that's next Monday, right?
Yes, something like that. So Ben, I think I like it. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel I could talk for another couple of hours. I think maybe not. Maybe we spare our listeners, if any.
I'm gonna wrap it up, throw it on YouTube. We'll get 2 views, and we'll call it a success.
Oh yes, sir. I look forward to that sweet advertising revenue.
Advertising revenue? What are you talking about? Is there something I'm supposed to know? Are you getting that money? All right. Thanks again, and I hope we can do it again soon. Maybe the next Monday of after your next letter. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes, sir. Sounds good to me. Thank you for suggesting this. Really appreciate it. And yeah, happy staking.
Really glad we did it. Thanks for your time.